Hey, what's going on, fellow money lovers? Let's just get right into it. I think everybody likes the presidential $1 coin program. Well, then again, a few years ago, people really talked a lot of crap about it. But in recent years, it's really become popular. It's one of my most popular videos on my channel. So let's jump into each year, and I'll have a few videos that cover each year of the presidential dollars. You can pick them up regularly at the bank. Not so much in like pocket change, but you can find them at the bank pretty regularly. And then I guess they get there from people's whatever. Let's just get right into it with the first one, which is the 2007 George Washington presidential dollar. So this one started off the series. They say a bunch of stuff. The U.S. Mint's website's really corny about it, like, we embarked on this ambitious journey to honor the presidents. It's a cool program. I think they could have done a lot more with the designs. But basically, it aims to commemorate each president by featuring their likeness on a dollar coin. So it ran primarily from 2007 to 2016, and then George Bush was added in 2020, I believe, when he died in 2018 or after he died. So the first one's the 2007 George Washington presidential dollar. There were 176.6 million of these made out of Philadelphia, and 163 million out of Denver. They do feature edge lettering like all the other presidential dollars that would come after it, but there are known errors on these George Washington presidential dollars, which make them one of the most valuable in the series, not just because of the errors, but because it has it's the start of the series. The error that I am talking about is the missing edge lettering error, and it's a significant number of these coins that were released without the edge inscriptions, which would normally be E Pluribus Unum, In God We Trust, the year, and the mint mark. So this has basically led to a name for these dollars called the Godless dollars, because it doesn't have the In God We Trust name. But if you know anything in numismatics, they always have some weird quippy name for it. Estimates suggest that there's really around 50 to 100,000 of these out there, but they're not sure of the exact number, and it was first discovered quite a while ago, really shortly after their release, and one of the first sales for it was over $600, but that one was in really good condition, with subsequent sales being around the $200 to $400 mark, but there are quite a few of them out there in lower condition, missing the edge lettering, that are worth around $40, $50. The second coin that was released in 2007 was the John Adams presidential dollar. This second coin really was popular, but it had a lot less of them minted, with around 100 million of them minted out of both the mints in Philadelphia and Denver. Now, the important thing about the John Adams presidential dollar is that there's two different errors. One that's the same as the previous one, has missing edge lettering, where they were released without any edge inscriptions. These are much rarer than the Washington errors because there's less of them known, and they usually fetch higher prices. The other one that's going to have actually more value to it is the double edge lettering, and it's basically like a double die, but on the rim of the coin, or edge of the coin rather. And this is from the coin passing through the edge lettering machine twice. So this was really common in Philadelphia as opposed to Denver, and these coins can sell for hundreds of dollars in really good condition. The third coin is the Thomas Jefferson presidential dollar in 2007. Now, there's even less of these made, and you'll see that be kind of a norm for this year as we go through the coins. So these had a smaller mintage even than the previously mentioned John Adams coins, with a little over 100 million. Philadelphia had 100,800,000 of the coins made out of that mint. Denver had 102.8 million, so a little more. And they also can have missing edge lettering to them, but these are less common than the other ones I mentioned, as they started to really crack down on this error at this point. So when you do see these go up for auction in really, really good grades, they can reach almost close to the $1,000 mark in some cases. The last one for 2007, and kind of rounding out the series for that year, is the James Madison presidential dollar. And this one kind of honors who we coin as the father of the Constitution. And weirdly enough, it has the lowest mintage, even though it's honoring the father of the Constitution, with 84.5 million out of Philadelphia and 87.7 out of Denver. So they made just a slight amount more out of Denver. Now, the really important part about these is not only the low mintage, but the error on these is a reverse struck-through error. That's something you're not going to see very commonly. Some coins exhibit areas on the reverse of these presidential dollars where the design is missing or is really faint due to debris on the dies during striking. So it's really just negligence on the part of the U.S. Mint workers, but it created a really good error. And Great Collections auctioned one of these back in 2019 or 2020 at MS68, so a really high grade, and I believe that coin drew a couple $1,000s. So, in conclusion, I mean, the presidential $1 series is really cool. I've always liked it. After the obverse and reverse designs were struck, the coins would undergo this separate edge lettering process to inscribe the parts on it, which I think is cool. It's a little different on how they do that in comparison to other kind of similar functions with coins. And the missing edge lettering, double edge lettering, and even some with upside down lettering have been known to come out. Now, the upside down lettering error is seen in later years, and I'll talk about that in other videos. But all these things add to the hype of them and kind of a good market for them now. The initial hype with the godless dollars from George Washington really helped the series start off, and then it kind of stagnated. But even though the market has stabilized a bit, I think collectors are really interested in these still. So let's talk about the 2008 presidential dollar coins. There are 4 new ones that came out that year, and they are to celebrate James Monroe, John Quincy Adams, Andrew Jackson, and Martin Van Buren. So each one of them had the same reverse as like every other presidential dollar. So the reverse is the Statue of Liberty, and then the obverses, of course, would feature the presidential portraits. So the first one was for James Monroe. He was the 5th president from 1817 to 1825. The presidential dollar series kept getting less and less mintage, so Philadelphia had a little over 64 million of them made, and Denver made over 60 million. The errors that you can look for, though, can make these really, really valuable coins, one of which is missing edge lettering, which was an error that kind of went across the entire series. There were some James Monroe dollar coins that were found without the standard edge inscriptions, which are normally E Pluribus Unum and In God We Trust, as well as the year and the mint mark. So these errors become really, really rare, especially in good conditions, and can fetch anywhere from between about $50 or $60 in upwards of $250 or $300. A historical sales example of a missing edge lettering coin would be an MS66 one that sold for $225 through Heritage only a couple years ago. The second one to be released was the John Quincy Adams coin, the 6th president from 1825 to 1829. Out of Philadelphia was even less of an amount, 57.5 million, and Denver minted 57.7 million, so just a hair more. The John Quincy Adams coins are, of course, going to honor him, the son of John Adams, who we talked about in the last video, and the obverse is his portrait. The errors that are known on this, though, are really, really valuable. Those are double edge lettering errors, which exhibit doubled inscriptions on the edge. These can be in upwards of $400 or $500 in value. There's also upside down edge lettering, which is not considered an error per se, but some coins that have the lettering upside down are really sought after by collectors, some of which have been seen selling for close to $100. An MS67 example with a double edge sold for over $200 through Great Collections in 2021. The third coin on the list is the Andrew Jackson presidential dollar, who was the 7th president from 1829 to 1837. Out of Philadelphia, there's 61 million of them minted. Denver minted a lower amount at 58.4 million. Although Andrew Jackson is quite a controversial president for various reasons. There are errors on these coins that can make them really valuable, despite the normal presidential dollar featuring Andrew Jackson being really one of the least valuable in this series in normal circumstances. Those are missing edge lettering, as discussed before, where it's missing the inscriptions on the edge, and this lack of inscriptions can make these worth between $50 and $100. The blank planchet error is really, really rare, but some Jackson dollars were found missing either the obverse or reverse designs, or both, and somehow getting out into circulation that way, primarily in rolls of them. So you're really not going to find these loose, of course, as they're really, really obvious, but these can sell in upwards of $300-400 in some cases, depending on condition of the blank planchet error. There was a missing edge lettering error that sold for well over $150 through PCGS at MS65. The last one on the list is the Martin Van Buren presidential dollar, who was the 8th president of the United States from 1837 to 1841. They minted an abysmal amount of them comparatively, at 50 million of them minted out of both mints, basically. There was 50.9 million out of Philadelphia, 50.2 out of Denver. Now, these coins follow the same pattern and have the presidential portrait on the front of them, and on the reverse have the Statue of Liberty. The errors that are known on these, though, is an interesting one, which is a struck-through grease error. So some of the coins have a weak or missing detail to pretty much the whole coin. This is due to grease interfering with the die striking process. So depending on the severity of the error, these can sell in upwards of $500 or $600. Usually they're minor, though, and sell for between $50 and $100. There is also an extreme version of an error called a feeder strike, graded MS65 through NGC, of a Martin Van Buren presidential dollar. This coin sold through Stax Bowers in 2017 for $5,980. The 2009 series included coins that would honor William Henry Harrison, John Tyler, James K. Polk, and Zachary Taylor. These coins, like the predecessors, would feature a portrait of the president on the obverse and the Statue of Liberty on the reverse. While intended for circulation, many of these coins would end up being hoarded by collectors due to not only their historical significance, but the various errors that you can find on them that make them really valuable. Now, normal coins just in good condition can also fetch far more than $1, so picking these up at your local bank is a really good idea. Let's start talking about the first one, which is William Henry Harrison, the 9th president. Out of Philadelphia, there was 43 million of them made, and out of Denver, there was a little more at 55.1 million of them made. William Henry Harrison would be the shortest serving U.S. president ever, with only 32 days in office. So, although this coin honors him, his time serving as the President of the United States would be extremely short. The obverse features his portrait, of course, along with his name and the years in office, which was 1 year. Not even. The reverse depicts the standard Statue of Liberty design, and of course shows the denomination of $1. Now, there are really notable errors, the main one being missing edge lettering. Some of these coins would be struck without the typical inscriptions on the edge, which would include E Pluribus Unum, In God We Trust, the year and the mint mark. These can be really, really valuable, some of which fetch in upwards of $200 or $300 depending on condition. A sales example of one of these with missing edge lettering sold for $475 through Heritage Auctions at an MS66. The next one on the list is John Tyler, who was the President of the United States from 1841 to 1845. Tyler would assume the presidency after Harrison's death in office only 32 days into his presidency. There were 43.5 million of these made out of both mints in Denver and Philadelphia. Now, these do have more errors that you can look for, which make them the most valuable versions of these coins, which are the doubled edge lettering, where the coins were accidentally ran through a second time in the edge lettering and pressing machine, giving them a double edge lettering. These in really high grades can sell for an upwards of around $500. There are also an error or quasi-error that is upside down edge lettering, in which the orientation of the edge lettering is incorrect due to a technical error of not feeding it into the edge lettering machine correctly. These can sell for pretty good value as well, but aren't really considered an error by most collectors, and usually sell for the $40 to $50 mark. An example of a John Tyler presidential dollar with doubled edge lettering that sold in auction was an MS-67, which sold for around $300 through Stack's Bowers in 2022. The next one on the list is the James K. Polk presidential dollar. Polk would be the president of the United States as the 11th president from 1845 to 1849. There would be even less of these coins made out of Philadelphia, but a slight hike in the amount out of Denver, with 41.7 million minted in Philadelphia and 46.6 million minted in Denver. James K. Polk would be known primarily for territorial expansion during his presidency, and his portrait will appear on the obverse of the coin. The notable errors for these are missing edge lettering, which we discussed earlier, where it lacks the edge inscriptions, making them worth usually around $100 to $200 in good grades. There are also weak strike errors, where a few examples exist with weakly struck details, ones that have dramatically insufficient details on either the obverse or reverse of the coin can sell in upwards of $300 or $400. An example of a James K. Polk presidential dollar with missing edge lettering at MS-66 sold for $325 through great collections only a couple years ago. The last one, for 2009, for the presidential dollars is the Zachary Taylor dollar. Zachary Taylor would be the 12th president of the United States from 1849 to 1850, serving just over a year before also dying in office. These coins would have 41.5 million of them made out of Philadelphia and 36.6 million made out of Denver, one of the lowest mintage amounts out of the Denver Mint for the presidential dollar series. Notable errors on these are struck through grease errors, which we mentioned in the 2008 presidential dollar video, where some coins exhibit weak details due to grease interfering with the striking process. If it's severe, these can sell for a few $100s. An example of a struck through grease error on a Zachary Taylor dollar with an almost completely missing portrait of Taylor sold for over $400 through eBay only a few years ago. As you can see, there's some really good value to be had in the presidential dollar series, most notably in the 2009 coins. I think since they also feature presidents who sadly had really short careers as president and died in office, they can be a little more popular for those factors, because if people are history buffs as well as collectors of coins, then they're going to really like these coins. We're on to 2010 here. It seems like everybody's having some fun talking about the first 3 years since 2007 of these dollar coins. So what are we talking about? We're talking about the coins that came out in 2010 that honor Millard Fillmore, Franklin Pierce, James Buchanan, and Abraham Lincoln. The Lincoln coin is definitely the favorite and most popular for this year of release of the $1 presidential coins. I think a lot of people didn't initially love this set, but have come to really like it, and it's become really popular even amongst collectors of all types. It's also a really good set to start out coin collecting. So let's get into it. The first one that was released was for Millard Fillmore, who was president of the United States from 1850 to 1853. One thing you'll see with this dollar coin series is progressively throughout its release, for the most part, the mintage amounts just kept getting lower and lower and lower. But that would help out now, years later, and for years to come from now, as that low mintage, like many other coins, is going to aid in a really solid value on the market. There were only 37.5 million of these made out of Philadelphia and 36.9 million made out of the Denver Mint. The design, of course, features Millard Fillmore on the obverse or front of the coin, who would assume the presidency after Zachary Taylor's death, who we talked about in the last series video. His name and years in office, of course, appear alongside the portrait. while the reverse features the familiar Statue of Liberty design, which would be the norm for the whole series, with the $1 denomination inscribed on it. Now, notable sales and errors for these, they can range highly in price, but the missing edge lettering error is one of the most notable for Fillmore dollars, where they were struck without the inscriptions on the edge that would normally be E Pluribus Unum, In God We Trust, the year and the mint mark. These have sold in upwards of $300 or $400, in some cases more, and usually can sell for easily $40 or $50 for one of these missing edge lettering coins. An MS-66 version of a missing edge lettering Millard Fillmore coin sold for over $200 through heritage auctions only last year. The second one released was for Franklin Pierce, who was President of the United States, the 14th president, from 1853 to 1857. There would be slightly more of them minted in comparison to the mints for Millard Fillmore, being 38.2 million out of Philadelphia and 38.3 million out of Denver. The obverse, of course, shows Franklin Pierce, with the back showing the Statue of Liberty. The most notable error for these is going to be doubled edge lettering. So similar to a doubled die, but produced through a different way, these were basically fed by human error back through the edge lettering machine, causing them to have the inscriptions around the edge of the coin to be doubled. These can sell for really good money, sometimes selling over $300 in high grades, but easily sell for the $40 to $80 range, even in decent conditions. A double-edged lettering Franklin Pierce dollar in MS-67 sold for over $300 through Stack's Bowers in 2022. The third coin that was released for 2010 was the James Buchanan presidential dollar, who was the 15th president from 1857 to 1861. The mintage would dip down a little bit again, being 36.5 million out of Philadelphia and 36.8 million out of Denver. Now, Buchanan was often criticized for his role in events that would lead up to the Civil War, and I think that historical significance, as well as him just being a lesser admired president altogether, would aid in the values of these coins not really being too high. However, there are a couple of errors you can look for that do make them really valuable. One of them being a missing edge lettering error. They can be valued anywhere around $40 or $50 or more. The best ones are weak strike errors, as the quality of production to these specific dollar coins seem to be inferior to other ones in the series, resulting in examples of this coin to have weakly struck details. This would be caused by insufficient pressure during the striking process, and ones that have really weak strikes can sell in upwards of a few $100s when they're graded well. An MS-66 missing edge lettering Buchanan dollar sold for $250 through great collections in 2021. The fourth and final coin that was released for 2010, and definitely the favorite for that year, is the Abraham Lincoln presidential dollar. Abraham Lincoln was the 16th president of the United States from 1861 to 1865. This coin would have far more of them minted, as I think the US mints were expecting sales to be much higher for this coin. Philadelphia would produce 49 million of them, and a little over 48 million would be minted out of Denver. Abraham Lincoln, which is one of America's most beloved presidents, would be pictured on the obverse of the coin, with the Liberty design being on the reverse. There are notable errors to look for on these Lincoln coins, being a struck-through grease error, where some Lincoln dollars exhibit weak details due to grease interfering with them during the striking process. These can sell for anywhere between $50 and a couple $100. There are also known examples of Lincoln dollars that are just in really high grade that sell in upwards of $40 or $50. A Lincoln dollar with a struck-through grease error that had portions of the portrait missing from the obverse sold for well over $500 through eBay only last year. For 2011, the series would release coins that would honor Andrew Johnson, Ulysses S. Grant, Rutherford B. Hayes, and James A. Garfield. These coins would follow the same format as the others, with a portrait of the president on the obverse and the Statue of Liberty on the reverse. There are many known errors that you can find on these coins, notably ones that involve the inscriptions on the coins, and we'll get to that for each one of them. So let's take a deep dive into each coin, talk about primarily their values, and we'll quickly cover each one of them with the key points to look for when you find them out in the wild. The first one released for that year was the Andrew Johnson presidential dollar, who was the 17th president of the United States. This would be from 1865 to 1869, and this coin would have a mintage of 37 million out of Philadelphia and 35.5 million out of Denver. Now, Andrew Johnson would become president following the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, which was the fourth coin released the previous year. His name and years in office would appear alongside the portrait on the obverse, while the reverse features the Statue of Liberty and the denomination $1. The most notable error to look for on these coins would be missing edge lettering. This is going to be something that goes across almost, if not all, of the presidential dollar series. Essentially, the production of these coins would be plagued by mistakes, resulting in various errors. This missing edge lettering error on some of the Andrew Johnson dollars would be where they were struck without the standard edge inscriptions, making them more valuable to collectors just in general. These errors can sell in upwards of $200, depending on the grade of the coin. There is a version of an MS-66 Andrew Johnson dollar that sold for over $150 with no errors at all, just really good condition through heritage auctions. The second coin released for 2011 was the Ulysses S. Grant presidential dollar. Grant would be the president of the United States from 1869 through 1877. The mint would produce 38 million out of Philadelphia and 37.1 million out of Denver. The obverse, of course, shows Ulysses S. Grant, who was a famed Civil War general that led the Union to victory and later became the president afterward. The most notable error to look for on these would be doubled edge lettering, where the coins were mistakenly passed through the edge lettering machine twice, resulting in all the inscriptions on the edge of the coin to appear twice. In some cases, in really high grades in good condition, these coins can sell for well over $300, with an example in MS-67 that sold for $475 through Stack's Bowers. The third coin released for 2011 was for the 19th president, Rutherford B. Hayes, who served from 1877 to 1881. There would be 36.8 million of these minted out of Philadelphia and 36.5 million minted out of Denver. Rutherford B. Hayes, who oversaw the end of Reconstruction, would be depicted on the obverse of the coin, and the same format with the Statue of Liberty would be depicted on the reverse. The most notable errors to look for are, of course, the missing edge lettering error, which can be worth an upwards of $100, but most importantly, the weak strike error. As we discussed in previous videos for these coins, there were a few examples that have weakly struck details due to the insufficient pressure during the striking process. These can sell for really good money. Ones that have really weak strikes can sell for hundreds of dollars, with a version of one graded MS-66 selling for over $400 through great collections. The fourth and final coin that would be released in 2011 for the presidential dollar series would be for James A. Garfield, the 20th president of the United States, serving only in 1881. Garfield would unfortunately be assassinated shortly after taking office, so he only served in 1881. These coins had a bit lower mintage than some of the others in the series at 37.1 million out of Philadelphia and 36.6 million out of Denver. The biggest error to look for on these coins is a struck-through grease error, where they exhibit weak details due to grease interfering with the production process. These can fetch on a low end around $20 or $30, and in upwards of $200 or $300 in dramatic cases. There was a version of an MS-67, James A. Garfield presidential dollar, that sold for over $200 through eBay only last year. We're getting into 2012, which is a really important year for this series because it would mark when the US Mint would cease producing these coins for general circulation. As you probably noticed with the previous videos about this series, the amount of them minted each year has pretty much gone down steadily. Instead, the 2012 presidential dollars were minted exclusively for us collectors. The presidents that would be featured on them were Chester A. Arthur, Grover Cleveland, Benjamin Harrison, and Grover Cleveland again for his second term. Each coin followed the same design pattern as the previous ones, with the president's portrait on the obverse and the Statue of Liberty on the reverse. So let's talk about the mintage figures, each coin, errors, and the market performance for them. The first one we're going to talk about is the Chester A. Arthur presidential dollar. Chester A. Arthur was the 21st president of the United States from 1881 to 1885. There would be a tiny amount of these coins made out of the mints, with 6.3 million out of Philadelphia and 6.3 million out of Denver. Chester A. Arthur would take office after the assassination of James A. Garfield, who we discussed in the last video. The most notable error for these would be missing edge lettering, where some of the Arthur dollars were struck without the standard inscriptions, which makes them valuable and sought after. These can sell in upwards of $200 or $300, with an MS-66 selling through heritage auctions for $375. The second coin is the Grover Cleveland coin. This is for his first term as 22nd president from 1885 to 1889. There were only 5.4 million of these made out of Philadelphia and 5.4 million made out of Denver. Grover Cleveland would serve 2 non-consecutive terms and would appear on 2 separate coins for this year. The most notable error for these coins is the doubled edge lettering, which is where they fed the coins into the lettering machine twice, and they will feature doubled inscriptions around the rim of the coin. These can fetch between $100 and $400 depending on grade, with an MS-67 selling through great collections for over $300 in 2022. The third one on the list is the Benjamin Harrison presidential dollar. Harrison would serve as the 23rd president of the United States from 1889 to 1893. There would be 4.2 million of these minted out of both mints in Philadelphia and Denver. Benjamin Harrison is the grandson of William Henry Harrison and is featured on the obverse of the coin, and the normal back of the Statue of Liberty is featured on the reverse. There are more than one error that you can look for on these Harrison dollars, which of course is the missing edge lettering error. Those can be worth in upwards of $100, but there are also weak strike errors, and depending on how dramatic the weak strike is, these can be worth hundreds of dollars, with a missing edge lettering and weak strike error in MS-66 selling through great collections for $525. The fourth and final one on the list is Grover Cleveland again, for his second term as U.S. president, as the 24th president from 1893 to 1897. There would be 3.9 million of them minted out of Philadelphia and out of Denver. This would be the only presidential coin that would represent a president for their second term in a non-consecutive manner. The most notable error for these is a struck-through grease error, where some Cleveland dollars exhibit weak details due to grease interfering with the striking process, and these can sell for well over $100. Even though in 2012 the U.S. Mint stopped producing presidential dollars for circulation, the process of making them would remain the same, with a manganese brass alloy composition and an edge lettering process that would pretty much always and frequently lead to errors. Record sales for all 4 of these coins exceed over $200, some in upwards of $500 or $600, so you can see that they can be really, really valuable. Let's talk about the 2013 presidential dollar coins. The first one for 2013 was the William McKinley presidential dollar. McKinley served as the 25th president of the United States from 1897 to 1901. There would be 3.3 million of them minted out of Philadelphia and 3 million out of Denver. The obverse, of course, is going to feature the portrait of the president, with his name, order of presidency, and years in office. The reverse remains the same as the standard for all of the coins of the series, which is the Statue of Liberty design with $1. The most notable error for these coins are McKinley dollars that are missing the edge lettering. This is where they lack the standard edge inscriptions due to human error, where they weren't fed through the edge lettering machinery during the production process. Some of these if they're entirely missing the inscriptions and in good condition, can sell in upwards of $300 or $400. The second coin on the list is the Theodore Roosevelt presidential dollar. He would serve as the 26th president of the United States from 1901 to 1909. There would be 3.2 million of them made out of both mints in Philadelphia and Denver for 2013, and the front of the coin will have a portrait of Theodore Roosevelt, who is considered one of the most iconic U.S. presidents. The rest of the coin will follow the standard format, having the Statue of Liberty on the reverse. There are multiple errors that you can look for on Theodore Roosevelt presidential dollars. One of them is a doubled edge lettering, which is where mint workers fed them through the edge lettering machine twice, stamping the inscriptions in a doubled format. These command really good premiums and can sell for well over $300 to $400 in high grades. The next one is not necessarily an error, but is an upside-down edge lettering variety where some coins have their edge lettering inverted. This is a minor collector curiosity and specimen to look for, but they can sell for easily $40 to $50. An MS-67 Theodore Roosevelt dollar sold through Great Collections for over $300 with doubled edge lettering. The third president in the 2013 coins is William Howard Taft. He would serve as the 27th president from 1909 to 1913. Philadelphia would produce 3 million of them, and Denver had slightly more, with 3.2 million minted out of that mint. The obverse of the coin is of course going to honor William Howard Taft, the only U.S. president who also served as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. There is an extremely rare error for these coins, which is a blank planchet error. Some coins were discovered missing both the obverse and reverse designs, leaving only a blank planchet with the edge lettering. These can be worth hundreds of dollars, with a version in MS-65 selling for over $500 through eBay. There was also a version of a missing edge lettering William Howard Taft dollar, lacking the edge inscriptions, which sold for $160 in MS-65 through Great Collections. The fourth and final one for 2013 is the Woodrow Wilson presidential dollar. Wilson would serve as the 28th president from 1913 to 1921. There was a very small amount, 2.9 million minted out of Philadelphia and 3.3 million minted out of Denver. Woodrow Wilson, of course, appears in a portrait form on the obverse, and the back is going to show a Statue of Liberty design. Notable errors would be the struck through grease error, where some of them have weak or missing details due to grease interfering in the production process. Some of them, which are severe, can sell for well over $200. Warren G. Harding, Calvin Coolidge, Herbert Hoover, and Franklin D. Roosevelt. These coins would also be struck at Philadelphia and Denver's mint, but like previous years, were not released to the general circulation, but to collectors only through the U.S. Mint. I think myself, as well as others, are enthusiastic about these coins because the particular interest is errors. There are missing edge lettering errors, off-center strikes, doubled edge lettering, and even struck through grease errors. These can be worth hundreds of dollars, turning your little dollar coin into some real profit. So let's talk about the first one, which is Warren G. Harding. He would serve as 29th President of the United States from 1921 to 1923. There were 3.7 million made out of both mints. The obverse features a portrait of Warren G. Harding with his name, order of presidency, and years in office. The reverse would keep the standard Statue of Liberty design with an inscription of $1. The most notable error for these is going to be missing edge lettering, which is super common across the series and happened throughout the whole thing. These can be really valuable though. They can sell for an upwards of $200 or $300, as seen with an MS-66 one that sold for $280 through heritage auctions in 2023. The second coin released was the Calvin Coolidge presidential dollar, who was 30th president of the United States from 1923 to 1926. Philadelphia would mint 3.7 million of them, and so would Denver. Coolidge's coin would follow the same motif as the rest, with a portrait of Coolidge on the obverse, and Coolidge is the only U.S. president born on Independence Day. His coin follows the standard format on the reverse as well, with the Statue of Liberty. There's multiple errors known for these coins. There's missing edge lettering, doubled edge lettering where they were fed through the edge lettering machine twice, and upside down edge lettering, which is not really considered an error, but more of a variety and still valuable. Upside down edge lettering coins can still sell for $20 or $30. Doubled edge lettering coins are the most sought after errors for these and can sell in upwards of $300 or $400 if they're in high grades. The third coin released was the Herbert Hoover presidential dollar, who was the 31st president from 1929 to 1933. There would be 3.7 million minted out of both mints again, and the obverse shows Herbert Hoover, and the back shows the Statue of Liberty. Hoover would be the president during the early years of the Great Depression, which was a very hard time for the United States as a whole. The notable errors on these would be missing edge lettering, which can sell for around $40 or $50, but the major one is a blank planchet error, where some of the coins, although a limited amount, were missing the obverse and reverse designs and only had edge lettering on them. They are extremely valuable. They can sell for close to $400 in some cases, with an example at MS-65 selling through great collections for over $300. The fourth and final one for that year was Franklin D. Roosevelt, who was the 32nd president from 1933 to 1945. Philadelphia and Denver would again mint 3.7 million out of them, and the obverse of the coin, of course, shows Franklin D. Roosevelt and a reverse of the Statue of Liberty, like all presidential dollars. The biggest error on these, although you can find missing edge lettering versions, is a struck through grease error. This is where the coin will have weak or missing details due to grease from the machinery interfering with the production process. Really dramatic versions of these in higher grades can sell for well over $400 or $500, as seen in multiple cases over the years, from great collections to heritage. The first coin for 2015 is the Harry S. Truman presidential dollar. Truman would be the 33rd president from 1945 to 1953. The mintage was a little higher than previous years, with 4.2 million out of Philadelphia and 4.4 million out of Denver. Now, the obverse of the coin would be the same as the rest of the presidential series, with a portrait of Harry S. Truman with his name, order of presidency, and the years in office inscribed. The reverse would retain the standard Statue of Liberty design and a $1 inscription. The most notable errors on these are gonna be missing edge lettering. These are really common across the whole series, but these ones can be really valuable as there's a little less of them out there for the Truman dollars as there are for others. Some of the coins lack standard edge inscriptions, and this makes them really sought after, some of which sell for $200 to $300. The second coin released was the Dwight D. Eisenhower presidential dollar, who was 34th president from 1953 to 1961. The obverse, of course, is going to show Dwight D. Eisenhower, the former 5-star general and president, and the reverse is going to have the Statue of Liberty. There was 4.2 million minted out of Philadelphia and 4.4 million minted out of Denver. The most notable error for these coins are doubled edge lettering. These are where they were passed through the edge lettering machinery twice by human error. This resulted in doubling on the lettering, and these can sell for between $150 and $250 in most cases if they're graded really well. An example was an MS-67 Eisenhower dollar with doubled edge lettering, and it sold for $225 through great collections in 2023. The third coin released for 2015 was probably one of the most popular as well, along with Eisenhower, which is the John F. Kennedy presidential dollar. This is one of the most popular of the whole series. Kennedy would be the 35th president of the United States from 1961 to 63 when he was assassinated. Philadelphia would mint 4.2 million of these, and Denver would mint 4.4 million. The obverse of the coin, of course, honors John F. Kennedy, which is one of the most beloved U.S. presidents. The reverse would retain the standard design and have the Statue of Liberty and inscription of $1. Now, the most notable errors on these are actually off-center strikes. Some of the coins were struck off-center, and depending on how dramatic it is, they've had versions sell for over $500 at auction. There are also missing edge lettering coins and doubled edge lettering coins that can sell for between $50 and $100 as well, depending on grade. The last president featured on a coin for this year was Lyndon B. Johnson, who was the 36th president from 1963, when he would assume office after Kennedy's assassination, through 1969. 4.2 million were made out of Philadelphia and 4.4 million out of Denver. Lyndon B. Johnson appears on the front of the coin in a portrait form, and the back has the Statue of Liberty. The biggest error on these, aside from missing edge lettering, is struck through grease errors. Due to an overabundance of grease on the production machinery, it interfered with the minting process and resulted in some of these coins having weak strikes on them. Depending on how dramatic the error is, they can be worth hundreds of dollars. An extreme version of this sold through great collections for over $400 back in 2021 with an extreme struck through grease error. 2016 presidential dollars. These $1 coins would be the final 3 coins honoring the last eligible presidents for this series. The 2016 releases would feature Richard M. Nixon, Gerald R. Ford, and Ronald Reagan. So with previous years, these coins were struck at both the Philadelphia and Denver mints, and like that, these 2016 coins would be released just for collectors through the U.S. Mint in rolls, bags, and proof sets. Collectors and error enthusiasts really like this series because there's some really valuable off-center strikes, missing edge lettering, and other lettering errors that you can look for, as well as struck through grease errors. The first coin, which features Richard M. Nixon, who was President of the United States from 1969 to 1974, features Nixon in a portrait on the obverse of the coin, along with order of presidency and years in office. The reverse would remain the same and the standard of the rest of the series, which is the Statue of Liberty design with a $1 inscription. There were 3.3 million minted out of Philadelphia and 3.3 million minted out of Denver, so a little less than previous years of other presidential dollars. The most notable error on these is going to be missing edge lettering. This is where it lacks the standard edge inscriptions, and some of these can be really sought after and really valuable. There are examples of these missing edge lettering errors selling for well over $200 through multiple auction platforms. A version of this, an MS-66, sold for $180 through Heritage Auction in 2022. The second coin released was for Gerald R. Ford, who would serve as the U.S. president as the 38th president from 1974 to 1977. There were 3.3 million made out of Philadelphia and 3.3 million minted out of Denver. The obverse, of course, showcases Gerald Ford, the only U.S. president that was never elected to office. His coin follows the standard format with the Statue of Liberty on the reverse. The most notable things to look for are going to be doubled edge lettering, where they were passed through the edge lettering machine twice. These can be worth an upwards of $200 or $300. There are also versions with upside down edge lettering, which isn't really an error per se, more of a variety, but some of these coins that have their edge lettering inverted can sell for $40 or $50. Really high condition, just standard coins can also sell for good money, between $20 and $50 depending on grade. The third and final coin for 2016 was the Ronald Reagan presidential dollar. Reagan would serve as the 40th U.S. president from 1981 to 89. Philadelphia would produce 3.3 million of them, as well as Denver's mint. The obverse of the coin, of course, honors Ronald Reagan in a portrait form, who's considered one of the most popular modern U.S. presidents. His coin, like others, is going to feature the Statue of Liberty on the reverse with an inscription of $1. The most notable error for these, aside from the missing edge lettering error, is blank planchet errors. These were discovered missing both the obverse and reverse designs and only leaving edge lettering in a blank planchet. These can sell for really good money, sometimes in upwards of $300-400 depending on grade. Now, the presidential $1 coin program was officially ended in 2016, but special Native American and American Innovation dollars would continue to be minted. In 2020, the U.S. Mint would produce a special presidential $1 coin, which honored George H.W. Bush. This would make it the only presidential dollar issued that year. As with previous releases, these coins were struck at both the Philadelphia and Denver mints, but they would be released only to collectors. Since there are errors that can be found on these, despite the lapse in time from the previous coins being made, it can make them really, really valuable. So let's talk about the George H.W. Bush dollar, its mintage numbers, notable errors, and what you can expect on the collector's market. George H.W. Bush was president from 1989 to 93 as the 41st U.S. president. There would be 5 million of these, so over 1.2 million more than other coins from previous years, minted out of Philadelphia and Denver. The obverse features a portrait of Bush with his name, order of presidency, and years in office. The reverse continues the standard Statue of Liberty design with a $1 inscription. Now, there are multiple errors that can be found. The first one is missing edge lettering, which is similar to every presidential dollar. A lack of quality assurance on the mint's part resulted in a missing edge lettering error where the coins skipped the edge lettering process and lack them. They can be worth between $40 and $50 pretty regularly, but in upwards of $200 or $300 if they're graded really well. The most notable errors to look for, though, are die cracks and cuds. Some Bush dollars exhibit die cracks, or cuds, which are small raised areas caused by broken dies. These can vary in value greatly, but if they're really dramatic, they can sell for easily $300 to $500, as seen through great collections and heritage auctions over the last 4 years or so. A version of a missing edge lettering Bush dollar in MS-66 sold for over $200 through heritage auction in 2023.